Welcome back to the Trash Bash. If you haven't been watching my channel recently, I'd like to say that this is part 2 of a vlog sort of isolation pandemic series, looking a bit different than my videos usually do. I would recommend you checking out the first episode of this Trash Bash thing. Basically, it's about building something miniature related, terrain, whatever, robots, out of trash, preferably during April. I've been doing an orc settlement, somewhere where my orcs can live. Sorry, my son's saying something, I'll be right back. Yeah, so pandemic style lifestyle at the moment, staying at home, as you noticed. But I'll try and stay out of the basement and, you know, make things a bit less confusing that way. Hopefully, maybe not as enjoyable. Depends on what you like. But anyway, I've been building this orc settlement, and we left off where I just finished sort of the timbers, or whatever you want to call it, for the tent roofs. And that was sort of my next step, was trying to figure out what I was going to sort of use as a canvas or whatever that's supposed to hang on this roof. But I sort of took a step back and realized that the huts themselves could maybe be orcified a little bit more. And so I added some more, like, just sheets of metal on there, just randomly, and made some frames for the windows and stuff like that. And just to add a little bit more detail, I made some holes in the metals, used this shank here. It's a tool, and I pressed it through the metal, and then I took pieces of toothpicks, like not right at the edge, but a little bit of a way in, and I made small sort of nails that I stuck in every hole, just so that it looks sort of like they just hammered these things on there. And then once I'd done that, it was time for the cloth. And at first, like, I found this in the trash. It's some kind of an IKEA bag. I think probably if you buy like a pillow, it comes in something like that. And I looked at the fabric and I thought, this is kind of nice. And so I cut out some, this really smells like perfume. I cut out some pieces and I sort of tried getting it on there, but it's just too stiff. Like, it doesn't fold, it doesn't crease, like it doesn't fall naturally. Like, you want it to look sort of like the cloaks and the miniatures or whatever, like it's part of the same world. You want some creases and folds and things like that, and this is just straight, like it was just like a flat roof. So that was a disappointment. So then I found this bag here. This is from, and I don't mean to be rude to anyone watching, but this is usually where middle-aged women buy their clothes in Sweden. It's a clothing store. And I thought, this is kind of nice, so I tried the same thing. I cut out a piece, and with the same result. It was just, it was just stiff. It was impossible to sort of make folds, and I was fooling around with sort of spraying on glue and white glue, and I was just not getting anywhere. And so eventually I ended up with a coffee filter. It's paper, some kind of paper with a really nice sort of leathery texture to it. It's got like some kind of clothy leathery texture, so I thought, I should try this, and that's what I ended up using. So my technique was to cut out as big a sheets as possible. I put them sort of on the roof, tried to sort of paint on it with the pencil wherever, I had to do some cuts, and just sort of got myself some pieces that fit all the way around the roof. First, I just sort of folded it together like this, dry, to try and sort of create some kind of structure in it, and actually maybe damage the fibers a bit in the paper, so that hopefully they stay sort of damaged. And then I dipped it in water. Sorry, am I making, can you hear me? And then I dipped it in water and I added white glue to it. Like this process might be strange, but this is the way I this worked for me, so I didn't want to change it. I didn't want to keep on experimenting. So basically it's dipping in water, it's then adding white glue, putting it on, letting it dry for a little while, and then putting Mod Podge on it. I mean, it's paper. So I want to make it as sort of strong as possible. So I figured, at least one layer of Mod Podge to just, if I drop a dice on there, it just doesn't fall through the roof, The thing is, when you put the Mod Podge on it, it gets wet again and it expands again. So it sort of expands and contracts quite a few times. Maybe the white glue isn't necessary. Maybe it's enough with the Mod Podge, but this was just how I ended up doing it, and I didn't want to change it because it worked out fine. If you try this, is that when this stuff gets wet, it expands quite a lot. And then when it dries, it contracts. So don't stretch it out too much. If you try this, don't stretch it. Just, it'll stretch itself. And try and fold and crease it as much as possible, because when it stretches out, it, a lot of the creases disappear. So that was how I solved the cloth on the tent, and I'm actually quite pleased over how it worked out. Regarding the trash thing, I'm supposed to be using trash for this build, and I mean, I don't really know where to draw the line. I could have taken used ones out of my bin and cleaned them, and then it would have been trash. I didn't. I used fresh ones because that just made sense. I mean, same goes with the coffee stirrers I've been using. If you use coffee stirrers, should I just use them first and then clean them and use them for the build, or should I just use them? You see where I'm going. But yeah, at least it's things that are around a household and are potentially trash. So once that was, the roofs were done, I had this brilliant idea that they should have a walkway. Because I was wondering, should there be stairs down to the ground? If we're thinking sort of defensible terms, maybe not optimal. Should they be able to connect somehow? Basically these huts are, my thought, their entrances into caves. It's just sort of like a little hallway where they take the shoes off and, put their umbrellas, and then they go down the stairs into the cave. But I figured it'd be kind of cool if these were somehow connected. And so I went back to the hardboard, because I noticed that when you sort of snap it like this, it's got this, you see all the layers, the thin layers that are sort of pressed together to make the hardboard. And it kind of looks like it could be slate. So I figured if I just make tons of these little small pieces, I could, make a slate pathway, or some kind of connection in between. They've just taken big pieces of slate and thrown them down and built sort of small walkways from one hut to the other. And I started experimenting, and I realized, this looks really cool. While I was making all these little pieces, it's a lot of back and forth here, but I realized, first of all, that, before I glue this on, I should Mod Podge whatever's underneath, because it'll be easier. I also sort of came to the conclusion that I might want a well, and I found this little crack in that I unintentionally built in the styrofoam. That could be sort of where water comes out from a spring or something like that. And so I should probably do those kind of things before I start gluing on all the steps. So I Mod Podged underneath, and sort of cut out for where I wanted this little water feature to be. By the way, I don't know what to make the water out of. I don't have any fancy sort of UV resin things. I'll probably end up using 2-component epoxy, maybe, because I know I have some of that lying around. I built the sort of what'll be the well where the water comes out from sprue. It's really difficult to concentrate on you when there's a really funny guy in the next room. I also made sure that this is as sort of solid as possible, even sort of faking cuts in it. Instead of like cutting bricks and building it, I tried to keep it as solid as humanly possible, and using sort of the polyethylene glue or whatever it's called that melts plastic, so that because if I'm going to put something water-like in there later on, I don't want it to sort of just pour out. Once my little water feature, which was finished, I needed to get all the slate pieces in order. And one issue with this hardboard is sort of when you crack it and you sort of try and fix the edges and stuff like that, you get this fine, it's almost like hair, which is not very slate-like. And I did something that I'm not sure I should be recommending it. Basically because I don't want you to burn your house down, because I put fire to them. So this is really like, don't do this at home. The way I did it, I used a lighter. I was close to I was at my kitchen sink, and I made sure there wasn't a fire alarm nearby. And once I used the lighter just to sort of sear off those, like basically put fire to all those small hairs so that they disappeared, I put these small pieces outside for like an hour, just in case. Because the thing with when things like this start to burn, it can burn inside even though you don't see it, and then all of a sudden you go to bed and then you wake up really hot. So if you're gonna do this, please be really careful, and by any chance that you're a young kid living at home, don't do this. If you're like, I watched this guy on the internet, and yeah, sure, but bring a parent in or something and ask them, is this guy sane or not, and let them judge. Okay, thanks. Anyway, even though if we put the safety thing, we take that aside, this worked out great. Now it just really looks like slate. So then I built my walkway, and then I just went kind of bonkers. I realized once that was done, that wouldn't it be cool if they could climb up on top of the hill and have like a lookout post or whatever up top, so that the walkway should continue all the way up the side of the mountain or hill. And then I was back to the sort of, well, then I should be Mod Podging the whole hill, and also filling up all the cracks that where the styrofoam doesn't really fit with clay, and so yeah, I did that, which took a lot more time than I thought, and I used a lot more clay than I thought. I mixed white glue into the clay, by the way, just to sort of make it stick. It fit fine, but I wanted it to stick. And then I built more walkways up to the top, and that's pretty much it for the main feature. That's like the hill is pretty much basically finished, apart from probably an obscene amount of details, which will be another video. And the huts are pretty much done, except for maybe some more details, like we're going to need skulls and things. To sort of continue on, I wanted to do the third sort of, I wanted a third hut, and I thought it should be like a lookout tower or a post or something pretty high up. But I brought all my minis out just to make sure that because this thing I get it's big. I want to sort of make it as small as possible, so I just wanted to double check where do minis fit here and there. And when I did that, I sort of realized that I'm a bit off scale, at least for these big Orruks. Like, it's a bit cramped for the Orruks. We're entering the world of like goblins would maybe like it here, which is there's nothing I can really do about it, but I should have made everything just a little bit bigger. So next up was this third building, pretty much. I want it to be high up, like a watch out tower or something like that. And sort of standing really on stilts. I put out a little bit more styrofoam, and so basically I can have some stilts leaning on the styrofoam and the others going sort of just down to the ground. I do have a grand plan because I want to I built that walkway up to the top of the big hill, so that's how I want this sort of lookout tower to connect. I want a bridge, like a rope, do you call it a rope bridge kind of a thing, to connect to the tower. Like that's the only way to get into the tower, is climbing the mountain and then crossing the, you know. And so I wanted to make it sort of the same height as the top of the hill. And basically, you know, I just put the styrofoam and then I cut pieces of sprue to make the first foundation, you know, sticks, whatever. Like I want things to be sort of orkishly crooked, but I also, you know, not too much. So these first sort of sticks, whatever, these pieces of sprue, I really tried to sort of pay attention to that they were sort of straight. I actually lay them out on my cutting board, checking the lines on the cutting board, and I used sort of glue so that the plastic melts, you know, so I've got something firm to build with. And then one side I just stuck into the styrofoam. The others two are going to be balancing on sort of wine cork bricks, same as on the other, used under the other buildings. Just put some cross sections in there, and you know, I got this sort of pretty rickety foundation. And because it was kind of rickety, I thought, you know, it'll be fun if it looks like these orcs. I mean, they've built some nice houses, but I mean, they're not brilliant. No, they don't. It's not going to be a cathedral going here, which is that's something throughout this build which is really on my side, is I don't have to really make nice things. Obviously it's supposed to look nice, but it doesn't have to be straight. It can be crooked and bent, and you know, it doesn't matter if the roofs look like they're sort of falling down, because you know, orcs built it. I didn't build it. Orcs built it. It's leaning a little bit, and so I put some, you know, something holding it from falling down, and you know, these things. And it looked. Now when I look at start looking at the build, I'm like, sure, it's sort of orc settlement, but it's starting to look sort of post-apocalyptic sort of kind of a thing. Apocalyptic, it's a difficult word. So when I had all these sort of cross sections and things in place, I was like, okay, I know I'm going into a lot of sort of small details, but I think that's a lot of if you choose some things like these nails on the metal sheets, it's sort of a detail that'll stick out, that'll make more of the build look sort of nice. And with these sort of cross sections, I figured if I just take some rope or wire, whatever, I can't find the word, let's say rope, that they've tied these sort of planks and everything together, and I just used whatever you sew your clothes with, that I can't figure out the word. It's just thread. I've just been using regular sort of sewing thread. Yeah, I did sort of tie it, but I used super glue just to make it stick to the back. So it's a pretty simple operation. But these kind of small details really go a long way. Now, the rest of this sort of tower is I mean, it's built pretty much like the other two buildings. I'm not going to go into it all that much because it'll just be repetition. But it's got the same base, hardboard base, made the walls in the same fashion, or same materials, maybe a different style. Roof is made in the same way, using the coffee filters again. And then it's the bridge to connect the tower to the main hill. And I had this stuff, found this stuff. It's basically what comes around packaging. Usually if you order something online or whatever, it comes in a cardboard package with this kind of stuff strapped around the cardboard. Took the length I needed and sort of divided the strip in half, and used that as the, you know, the base of the bridge, and then just glued coffee stirrers on there. I haven't mentioned it, but with all the coffee stirrers also on the tower thing, I sort of try and scratch them and with a knife make something that sort of resembles wood grain and things like that. And then did the thread thing again, just to look, make it look not just like glued on coffee stirrers. Pretty much all the basic structures are done. I mean, obviously I put some Mod Podge and clay on that other little piece of styrofoam and things like that. But I mean, this is pretty much it. I have some thoughts. Like I was given a great idea that there should be like do you call it a fireplace maybe somewhere? Might get one of them. But I've mainly been thinking about the edges of this. I mean, it's a square board. I want to sort of cut it down as much as possible once I've, probably next episode. I don't need all this empty space. But I'd like some comments on if the edges should be like square like there are or round. Like should I round off the edges of this board or should they be square? I can't really decide, and I'd like some thoughts and comments on that if you would be so kind. And what's left? Details, pretty much. Skulls, maybe some weaponry, stones, sand, plants, but basic structure-wise, I think it's pretty much done. I think it's pretty much done as well when it comes to trash. Like I'm not going to try and find whatever looks like a little skull or a plant or things like that in the trash. I will be using whatever I got, proper sort of miniature company produced things and glue and sand and all that kind of stuff. I don't think there's much more that will be coming out of the trash. That being said, I mean, this build, I haven't bought anything to build this entire sort of buildings, hill, tents. And so that's pretty much it for this week's vlog build. Next up, details, and then painting this thing, and then it's done. But yeah, please let me know about the corners, and if you have any other just sort of spontaneous ideas. I'm not going to build like there should be a merry-go-round on there, but I might have missed something obviously orcish that should be a feature. Like I thought, an altar, but I don't really know where I can fit them in. But it's like some kind of altar ritual kind of a thing, or a fireplace, some other little feature. Anyway, thanks very much for watching this video. Sorry I couldn't show you any more of my basement, but there wasn't even time for that this week. Let's see what happens next week, and bye.